Okay, we're streaming, guys. Just so you know, meeting's not called to order yet, but we are streaming.
Kelly, my time is never the same as yours. Do you show 6:28?
I do.
Okay.
But just holler at me.
Okay.
So whenever Megan says we hit the time, you do have a quorum. Even if Chris isn't here right on time, you can start once she says to go, so.
So I have the Zoom link for entering an executive session up and available, but is that also going to be like in the chat, or do we need to make sure we keep the email up and available?
I would keep that email there. That's
Okay.
how I'm doing it, Susan, so I can
Okay.
switch to the other one pretty quickly. I've got that set right behind my Zoom account here, because we'll leave,
Okay.
completely leave this meeting and then go enter the other one.
Okay.
It's 6:30, Kelly.
All right. We'll call this meeting to order for USD 348 Board of Education. We will have, our first item of business will be to approve the agenda, but we actually have 5 amendments that I'll introduce here in a moment. Before we get to that, just to talk a little bit about our voting procedures tonight. When we vote on things, I'll ask that you indicate what, for example, if I say all those in favor, I will ask you to raise your right hand and also say aye. So I'll ask you to unmute so that we can have both a visual cue of voting and also a verbal cue. And then I'll ask for those same signs for anyone who opposes. I'm going to try to be very careful to narrate as much as possible. So at the end of each motion, I'll be sure to say motion carries, 7-0, 6-2, etc., just so that we have that for Megan's recording, but also for people who are watching, so that we can try to deliver in the same way that if people were in the room, try to replicate that procedurally as much as possible. And so with that, did somebody say something? Okay. With that, I move that we approve the agenda as presented with the following 5 amendments. The first amendment would be under item F, under financial report, to remove discussion of 2021 fees. The second amendment under letter F, financial, would be to add discussion of the iPad quote. The third amendment would be under letter F, to add bond refunding approval. The fourth amendment under letter H, old business, would be to add summer food service program district representative appointment. And finally, amendment number 5 under new business would be weighted grades class discussion. That's my motion. Is there a second?
I second.
Did you catch that, Megan?
Yeah.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of approving the agenda as amended, please raise your right hand and say aye.
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 This is my right hand. It looks like left on my screen.
Yeah.
Rule breaker. All those opposed would be that I'd ask for the same 2 signs. And motion carries 7-0. Okay, great. All right, the next item, guys, will be to enter into executive session. So I move we enter We're into executive session with Mr. Dorothy and Cindy Frick to discuss negotiation items for the 2021 school year pursuant to the exception for employer-employee negotiations under COMA. And the open meeting will resume at 6:50 p.m. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Phil has seconded. All those in favor, please raise whichever hand and say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion carries 7-0. At this time, guys, we will now switch over to our executive session link. So we'll see you on the other side.
And then there were 3.
Hey, Megan, can I just go play some PlayStation and you text me when I'm supposed to come back?
Yeah, just make sure you mute it.
I will.
Okay, good. Good plan.
Uh,
Oh no. Okay. So, I'll text you.
they're got to go longer, don't they?
Probably. I'm texting you.
Okay, best laid plans, guys. Got in there and it wouldn't take the password, so I tried different passwords. And after 5, it blocks you out for 30 minutes. So we're gonna try to come back as soon as we can get everybody back. I'm texting everybody, trying to. Phil's back, Andy's back, Susan's back. Oops. Chris, please come back to the regular meeting. Who else am I missing? Carrie?
Yep.
And Tony.
And Tony. Okay. Let me see what I can get here.
Carrie's back.
Regular meeting. Oh, there's Carrie.
I'm back. So nobody got in? It wasn't just me?
No.
Carrie.
I'm here.
Yep.
And Tony.
And Tony. Okay. Let's see what I can get here.
Carrie's back.
Regular meeting. Does anybody have Tony's? I apparently don't have him in my phone to text him. Can somebody text Tony?
If nobody has it, I can go get it.
I've got it. I'm texting him now.
All right.
It's 6:50, so I'll go ahead and call the public part of the meeting back to order for USD 348 Board of Education. Why don't we all collectively just take a deep breath? We're going to figure this out. I don't know about you all, but I had full armpit sweating when I couldn't get into executive session. I thought maybe it was just me. And I thought, what have I screwed up already? I lay awake all night last night, mapping out every moment of this meeting so it could go smoothly. So that stuff happens and we'll figure it out. Keep our composure. I do think since that we have a couple other options, a breakout room would be possible for executive session. But I think with the time that we have remaining until 7, rather than get discombobulated for something that doesn't work, unfortunately, and I don't want to hold up the other people. We have quite a few public recognitions on our docket tonight, and I think it's important for those things to happen at a time that people are expecting those to happen. So I think we'll probably have to punt our executive session to the end of the meeting, and I'm sorry about that for those for whom that affects, besides just board members. By then, either we won't be locked out of our executive session point of entry, or we could possibly by then troubleshoot a breakout room. That might buy us some time until the end to be sort of multitasking. Is there any reason why, Mr. Dorothy, do we need to wait until 7 to go ahead and continue on with our consent agenda?
You really should wait until 7 o'clock because
Okay.
that's the expectation. In fact, I think even in my message, I told people to come on at 7 unless they just want to watch the executive session. So I would
Sure.
highly recommend that the board not start anything until 7 o'clock.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I'm sitting here with my link ready and I'm all set up and my password, and somehow, some way, I got signed out. And sometime today, so I click the link and it takes me in there like everybody else. And of course it says, if you're the host, sign in. So I tried to sign in, and the password that I thought it was not the correct password. And so I tried that variations of that 5 times, and then it said 30 minutes, you're blocked. So
Oh, so now you're locked out too. Okay.
yeah, for until now, when we come back later, we can try it again. And I think I've got it. I am signed in now, so it shouldn't be a problem this next time.
Okay.
Best.
No
late.
worries. My favorite expression that I've been using over and over is, I did my best. This is my very first plague.
Yeah.
So,
And it happens all the time. So
it's okay.
Yeah. No lives were lost in this little fiasco, and we are fine, and we'll get it figured out. It happens all the time.
That's the reason to use the exact same password for every account you have.
No,
Do not vary
Do
that
not
ever.
tell my kid that.
Post it on Facebook. Yeah. Well, we could do a 2-minute executive session later on, just to test out and see if the technology works for us, and then come back if we wanted to
Yeah.
not be stuck in there for 10 minutes again if we have to troubleshoot things. But can we do the the breakout room and also still be in a technically executive session, you think? Or is it somewhat public that way?
I don't know. Jana, what's the security of a breakout room?
I think the breakout room would just be whoever I put in that room. And then you all would see who's there. So you would know if somebody isn't supposed to be there and they are there. And then we can set a timer on it and it will automatically bump you back into the main room when you're done, or you can join the main room when you're ready.
Well, maybe that would be easier to do
Mhm.
If you, is that something you could do, Jana, here when
Yes.
we're ready to do that? And then
You
I will
bet.
have to do a little more practicing, I guess. I just hate for us to miss again because we've got several things to discuss. So,
Right, right.
Yeah.
but a breakout room, if we can keep that safe, that would be fine. Might be easier for everybody.
Are we recording this session at all?
All of this is being recorded. Would the breakout room be recorded?
I don't know how it defaults to that. I do know that if you put anything in the chat box on the side in the breakout room, it will report over into the, like when you download the whole transcript or whatever, that'll show up. But I just, as long as we avoid the chat box, we should be all right there, I think. But I don't know how the recording defaults to the main session or the breakout room or both.
That's a good question. I don't know.
I
We got
think it stays on the, I think it stays on the main session, but I can look at that. And when you go into executive session, I can watch the YouTube feed and just see where we're at on it.
Okay, that might work.
So when we go back into executive session, let's do like, I know ironically, this was what we were trying to avoid, but maybe we do, a 3-minute executive session to give us all time to get there, make sure it's working so that Jana can then check to see what's being recorded, what's not. Again, to Chris's point, so we're not sitting there for 20 minutes waiting if it doesn't work. Maybe we do a shorter one to make sure it's going to work out okay, and then do what we need to do.
Yeah, makes sense.
Mhm.
Three minutes.
Phil, we may have time to watch the leaves change on your tree behind you. This would be good.
Yeah, I do like seeing all the creative backdrops for people. Oh, look, they work.
I actually took a picture of the inside of my house and I'm using that as the backdrop.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, it's not live. It's actually an image.
Oh, it could be mayhem behind you.
Well, at some point in time, all those pictures are going to catch on fire.
The meeting where 2 minutes felt so long that we could literally see the seasons change before our eyes.
Oh, it's winter. I think it's winter.
That is awesome.
Don't go back to spring here in a minute.
Well, no, that's spring in Kansas, isn't it? My gosh. I mean, all 4 seasons in one day.
Just put Easter eggs in your snow.
All right, it's 7 o'clock. Call this meeting back to order again. Thank you for your patience. Welcome, board members and public to USD 348 Board of Education meeting. At this time, can we have a motion, please, for the consent agenda?
I motion we accept the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Phil Harvey's moved. Is there a second?
Chris Perry.
I'll second.
Oh, okay, sorry, it was fast. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye.
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 Hi.
Gotcha.
All those opposed, same signs. Motion carries 7-0. Okay. At this time, we're going to, with everything that's been going on, we had to postpone the March board recognitions. So we're going to circle back and do those recognitions at this time for the ones that were supposed to happen in March. And then we also have some for April as well. Everyone's going through a lot right now, and it is important that we continue to celebrate the wins. It's important for kids, it's important for staff, it's important for families. And so even though it's not the same as folks being able to come in person and for us to be able to shake their hands and applaud for them, we're going to still try to do the best we can in recognizing hard work and excellence in this way. Everyone will still receive the board issued certificate of achievement that they would normally receive in person. Those will be mailed, and Megan Johnson is taking care of all that for us, and we're very thankful for that. So at this time, we're going to start with recognitions for the Intermediate Center. The first one is the Spelling Bee champion, which was Ryder Hubler, and we spell excellent, EXCELLENT. So Ryder, if you're out there watching, congratulations for being the IC Spelling Bee champ. That is awesome. The second recognition we have is for the Geography Bee champion, which was Arthur Seiler. And I'm so excited that geography is happening at the IC in that way, because when we know where people live, we can understand what is going on in our world. So I think that's so great. As Westerners, I don't know if we're as strong in geography as we could be or should be, one could argue. But Arthur, if you're out there watching, good for you, okay? That's awesome. The next grouping are honors choir participants. This is also from the Intermediate Center. And these are students of Miss Katie Jacobson, who's fabulous, just does a great job with the music program there. And there are quite a few names here, so I'm going to list them all off. Before I do, I will say that I helped Mr. Gary Keller with getting the piano accompaniment practice tracks for these kids recorded. And I remember being over at his house doing that and looking at this music, and this music was tough that these kids had to do. So when I list all their names, please know that this is not a Mary Had a Little Lamb situation that these kiddos did. This music was really challenging and certainly worthy of being recognized for excellence. So the names of those students are as follows: Tucker Flory, James Baker, Franklin Kerr, Mackenzie Whitaker, Peyton Chappelle, Sarah Beth Crummett, Jalen Johnson, Rachel Watkins, Kaysen Dick, Mason Hoffman, Allison Barnes, Riley Holder. So congrats to the honors choir participants for the IC. That was just excellent. And I believe the honors choir concert was on the same day as a local Nutcracker performance here in town. So those kids raced from that. So many of those are my students. So I know a lot of those kids raced from honor choir day back to a performance with me. So they're super dedicated. Well done. Another one to add to that, additionally, was the elementary state honor choir qualifier. So this moves beyond districts and then to the state level. And the audition process, I know, for state is no joke. These kids have to submit an online audition. It is quite grueling. And we had a representative from the IC who attended the State Honor Choir Festival in Wichita that required learning a lot of music in advance, and then going to Wichita and spending the entire day rehearsing with kids from all over the state, and then performing that night at a beautiful concert. It's a really, really big deal. And so I'd like, on behalf of the board, to extend our congratulations to Joelle Nichols. Well done. All right, so congrats to all. Oh, look at all the applause. I love it. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Okay, so that's it for the IC. Moving on to, these are other March recognitions that normally would have happened in March, but moving on to Baldwin High School. For our wrestling team, I'm going to begin with our academic all-state wrestlers. So not only are these kids putting in the time daily on the mats at practice, but they're also putting their time in with the books. And that's always something to celebrate. I wish Mr. Harris was here, because he could tell you everything about every one of these students and articulate that very well. He probably could tell you their middle names. I'm sorry that I'm not able to do that to the extent that he would be able to, but nonetheless, we still want to offer our heartfelt congratulations for the academic all-state wrestling recognition that the following Baldwin High School students received. Their names are as follows: Bianca Ludicky, Kayla Powell, Kayla Mountain, Emma Grossamy, Lucas Hopper, Josh Broyles, Lane Anderson, and Toby Thomas. So again, congrats to these student athletes for getting it done on the mat, getting it done every day at practice, and making sure and taking care of their work in such a way that they're shining academically. That is wonderful. Okay, moving on. Also, another wrestling point of recognition are those wrestlers who qualified for the state wrestling tournament out in Salina, Kansas, back in March. For our boys, we had 4. Nikos Benton, who is a sophomore, was one of our state wrestling qualifiers. Lucas Hopper, Jr., also a state qualifier. Josh Broyles, also a junior and state qualifier. And Toby Thomas, junior, state qualifier. Congratulations to each of those. I wish I could give you their stats and their records, but you have to be putting in the work to make it to state. That doesn't come easily, so congrats to them. On the girls' side, new this year to Baldwin, big deal to make it to state no matter what. First year of a program for these 2 girls to make it, even more of an achievement. I was so excited to see this program added in such a meaningful way, and speak for everyone when we offer our congratulations to the following 2 young ladies from Baldwin High School. Maddie Hargett, who is a freshman at Baldwin High School, qualified for the state wrestling tournament. First year of this program, first year in high school, big deal. Congratulations, Maddie. And the second one is Miss Emma Grossamy, who is a junior this year at Baldwin High School. And she also qualified for the state meet. Was really exciting to get to watch them. I didn't go in person, but you could watch. There was some live streaming, there were videos. Super proud of all these kids. And on behalf of the board, we congratulate each and every one of you. So well done. Yay. Okay, our last March recognition that was on our list was the Excellence in Education Award, which was presented, someone correct me if I get the name of this wrong. This was one of the Chamber of Commerce Awards that was presented recently at our spring banquet. Is that right? I think that's right. Yes. And very exciting because someone new to our district, but has made such an impact that this person was recognized for excellence in education this year. And that person is Dr. David Yu. So we congratulate and thank you for the hard work you're doing on behalf of USD 348. I've heard many good things about him and the way he's able to align his academic experience with real life examples and experience. I've heard that many times, and it translates in a way that kids, it really means something to them, and that stood out in this way, and he received that award. So we certainly want to highlight that in this forum as well. So congrats and thank you to Dr. David Yu. So now we are caught up with our March recognitions, and we're going to move on to the ones that we had slated for tonight's April meeting. Today is April 20th, which happens to be National Volunteer Recognition Day. And since that fell on our board meeting, we thought it would be really neat to take a moment to recognize our some of our parent volunteers that do so many things behind the scenes and are really silent servants in a lot of ways, but are so necessary to the layers that make up our district. Those things are so important, and these people just do this year after year. So we're going to take a moment to recognize the leadership that is represented by each of the buildings in our district. Because without that parent investment, parent involvement, it just takes all of our relationships to another level. These groups raise funds that directly impact classrooms. These groups bolster school spirit and foster a sense of community by the work that these moms, dads, grandmas, and grandpas all do voluntarily. So we want to lift that up on behalf of the USD 348 Board of Education. At this time, we'd like to recognize the executive leadership team from the combined PC and IC PTO. So there in the elementary, their PTO is combined between the two buildings, and they work together on that. And the executive leadership team, I want to thank all of them that volunteer in that way. But the executive leadership team, I'd like to thank in particular tonight, we would like to thank in particular tonight, is Jason Barker and Jamie Cox. So they are the leadership team at the IC and the PC, and we thank you for the countless number of hours that you put in year after year. At the Baldwin Junior High level, also structured as a PTO for their parent support group, the president of that we would like to recognize tonight and thank on behalf of the board is Heather Wall-Smith. Again, all of these, there are many people who help volunteer, but without those points of leadership, all those folks keep everybody else organized. So really want to just extend a lot of gratitude for that. So Heather, thank you for your role at the junior high. And then lastly, in the spirit of Volunteer Appreciation Day, we want to thank at the high school level, thank the Booster Club. The Booster Club here in Baldwin really operates much as the PTOs do at the junior high and elementary level. The Booster Club is for everyone. It's not just for a particular sports team. It's everything. It's bash, it's after prom, it's chess club, it's football, it's for everyone. So it really does kind of serve as a PTO type for the high school. For the recognition on that tonight, first I'd like to, speaking of the bash, the Booster Club has sort of some things umbrellaed underneath it, but I would like to recognize the two co-chairs for the bash and thank them for their time this past year. And those two individuals are Susie Grossamy and Kim Harvey. So thank you, ladies, on behalf of the board. That's a huge undertaking and we appreciate it. It's a huge piece of setting our community and school spirit off right at the very beginning of the year. So it's a hard event to pull off because it's the first home game. So you have to be having your ducks in a row in July. You can't wait. And so thank you, ladies, for doing that. They both have seniors, but they also have younger kids. So we get to keep them for a while and that's great. Moving on to the SNAP chair, that's Safe Night After Prom. The chairperson for that, which is basically a year-round commitment that we would like to thank, is Kim Bifus. She's worked tirelessly this year. I was very excited about the idea of getting to recognize her tonight because theoretically, this would have been the Monday right after prom, had things been normal, and thought, wouldn't this have been a nice time to thank her for the organization of that. And even though prom didn't happen, as we all know, I think it's even more important that we recognize her. There's already a plan for what to do with all the donations that she collected, all the work that she went to. These ladies are already meeting tomorrow night and coming up with a plan B. So if you are one of the businesses watching in the community that you donated, you gave, there's still, these ladies will not be stopped, and they're still hooking up to get things to seniors. It's just not in the after prom format that they hoped for. Kim's youngest is a senior. So this isn't just a thank you for this year. This is a thank you for all the years, elementary on through, of the way she's been a big form of that parent support. So thank you, Kim. Last but not least are the outgoing co-presidents of the Baldwin High School Booster Club. Those two ladies are Tina Schrock and Sarah Barth. They both have seniors as well, and those are the seniors they have are their youngest two. And so this isn't, again, for them, not just a thank you for this year. These ladies have been plugged in at every level all along the way and have volunteered. I can't even think of counting the hours year after year. So we want to make sure as a board and thank them as well. As the co-presidents, they, all the things that are underneath, such as BASH and the after prom and everything else, mulch sales, you name it, I could name off a whole list. Those two ladies have been spearheading that all along the way, and they are at the end of their service road with their youngest getting ready to graduate. So on behalf of the board, again, just want to give one final thank you to all of the parents that not only serve in leadership capacities for these organizations, but who also volunteer and pitch in along the way. It takes everybody, and it does not go unnoticed. So thank you. All right. At this time, we will pause for a moment to see if there is any public comment. I have not received any public comment. Are the other designated recipients received anything? Okay, I'm getting a nod no. Just to explain for those who might be watching at home, instead of coming to the meeting in person, our procedure, this was laid out in a district-wide email and district-wide Facebook page and the instructions if you'd like to refer back for future reference. But just want to go ahead and plug that here as well. In lieu of coming in person and having still a meaningful way to participate virtually, if you have a public comment that you would like the board to make sure and be aware of, you may email your comment to publiccomments@usd348.com. This must include your name, your address, and a brief summary of what you would like the board to hear. It cannot contain specific information such as names of a particular staff member or student. You have to be able to describe your issue in a very general way so that we're not violating any laws about confidentiality on our end. If it is a more specific conversation that needs to take place, of course, you can get in touch with us individually. We always recommend you go to the source, the most direct source as possible. But if for whatever reason that needs to continue further, we want to make sure you have ways of getting hold of us during this time. Those comments must be received by 7 p.m. of the meeting night in order to be read. And they will be reviewed so that they are appropriate for live streaming. And that's the procedure moving forward, but we want to make sure folks know about that. But there are none for tonight, so we will move forward. We are now at item F, financial report. With Cindy Frick will be helping us on that, as well as others along the way. The first item on our agenda under this would be the asphalt bid.
Right, we did take bids a couple weeks ago for the expansion of the bus barn and district support services parking area, as well as resurfacing the road that goes to the high school bus loop. We received 4 responses, and the low bid was Kilo Construction for $52,345. We did have about $50,000 left in capital outlay for asphalt needs. And so we recommend going with a low bidder. There
Does
is
anyone have
a-
questions?
How much were they low by? What was the spread?
Let's see, the high end was 65,000 and the others were fairly close at 57 and 58,000. And then Kilo was at 52,000.
Have we used them before for anything?
Yes, I believe we have. Chuck, are you on here? Chuck was going to be at the meeting tonight to answer any questions.
Hey, Chuck, you're muted.
Gotta hold your space bar down, maybe.
Bottom left corner.
Okay, it looks like it's gone. Can you hear me?
There you go.
There you go.
Okay. So I'm sorry, I asked that a question again.
Oh, my question had to do with, them being the lowest bidder. That's somebody we've done business before and been happy with.
Yes, we've had a pretty good history with Kilo Construction. Not on purpose, but they do bid on our projects. There's been some bids that they haven't won because they've been high. And there's been some that they have won. They did all of our repaving our last year projects on the junior high gym parking lot and that main entrance parking lot. So they've always done good work. They've helped me out with a lot of advice and for planning purposes for the future and stuff, and given me some ideas. So they've been good to work with, even when they haven't necessarily won our projects.
Anybody else have any questions? If not, I'd make a motion that we accept the bid for 52,000 and change for repaving those streets as Cindy outlined.
I second.
All those in favor of accepting the bid for $52,345 from Kilo, please raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries 7-0. Thank you. Okay. Next item under financial, classified stipend. Mr. Dorothy.
At the last meeting, the board asked Cindy and I to kind of do some studying on this, on what we might do for those employees that are going above and beyond and coming into work. An example would be our cooks right now who are coming in preparing meals, to see if we were going to do something above beyond. We talked about a dollar amount per hour, but then we also talked about maybe a stipend might be more appropriate. In between time, and I may let Cindy probably, and I need to let Cindy kind of answer some of this, but we've done some talking with legal through the Kansas Association of School Boards about how this might look. And I think we're still working on that. So Cindy, what would you have to add to that?
Yeah, KSB just had some concerns if we're opening ourselves up to some issues with treating certain groups differently, especially in the midst of the COVID situation. And so I will follow up with them, now that payroll all the payroll questions are over. I think they'll have more time to dig deeper into some of the other questions we've been asking. And at the same time, we're also getting some CARES money, which is some COVID aid for education. Our portion of that appears to be about 94,000. And a part of that, as Mr. Dorothy and I have discussed, is potential reimbursement of some technology that staff are using, those that are working from their home are having to use. So this topic may morph into something more specific, through the COVID specific funding. But I think we'd like to do a little more research and then keep you updated on that topic.
If this has been kind of one of those things where you think you got a good path and there's a good reason to do it, and then you get talking to the attorneys and somebody else asks a different question and it's like, oh, that's not as exact as I thought it was. Such things as, do you have a liability or fare if somebody actually has the virus and can't come to work and is having to stay home, and can you differentiate that and make that fair? So there are some hooks here along the way that have made this not as simple as we might have thought this was at some time. That doesn't mean we aren't going to get there, but Cindy and I would like a chance to ask more. We need to sit down specifically with the attorney and say, here's what our issue is and how would this work, and not put the district in some sort of liability issue by making that decision. So, and I think we have time. I think if we could come back by the May board meeting, I think we could get this dealt with appropriately. So that's kind of where this is at.
Okay. Related to that, that conversation in terms of, and I think Cindy, you touched upon this, but related to that, can you dive a little bit deeper into looking into expense reimbursement considerations? For example, if a teacher has needed to up their data plan at home to accommodate extra, just all of the extra, are those things that we need to be taking a look at?
Yeah,
I think that's somewhat related to, and maybe qualifies with some CARES funding, but if we could look at that while you're researching the other, I think that would be helpful.
Okay, we can do that.
Essentially,
If that's okay with everybody else.
Essentially, there's been some districts that are jumping in and reimbursing some staff for utilizing their home internet to teach kids, or their personal cell phone at home to make contacts with kids. Some districts have been jumping in and providing a stipend for that. Because if they have unlimited data, maybe it's not really bothering them, but maybe some of them have expanded their internet, or maybe it's running minutes on a plan they have that's not unlimited. So it is something we're considering. But Chris?
Yeah, do you know if they're doing it more like as a $50 stipend or $100 stipend, something that's easier to administer from the financial side, and not just a $83.67 for your plan type of thing?
No, it's a straight flat fee is what most districts have been doing, and saying it's $80 or it's $100, just a flat fee to kind of help that.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on this for now? I think it looks like we're punting on that until May while we do some more research. Okay. Next, 2020-2021 budget.
Yes, on the 2021 budget, just kind of a broad scope picture at this time. We will be receiving some additional, pardon me, I'm looking at these spreadsheets, receiving some additional state funding to the tune of $286,000. As long as we can use our student count from 2 years ago, which would be the case unless something were to change this legislative session. We do have approximately an $83,000 increase for the co-op. We have potential increases for health insurance and property insurance. And when we talk about, or I guess one thing we also need to be aware of is that for this year, we can write off of the 18-19 student counts, but next year we will not have that high of numbers. And so one concern is our enrollment trend. We've got an average enrollment of about 101 currently at the high school for each grade level. And we're bringing in at the primary center an average of about 84. And so if this trend continues, we're looking at lower foundation aid numbers for the future. And I just want to make you guys aware of that. We also have a couple funds that we are having to potentially support. And one of them is food service. We'd had higher expenditures, lower revenue the last couple years. And we're looking at potentially having to transfer to food service at the end of this year to keep them with a fund balance of some kind. And not necessarily this year, but also in the future, we'll need to watch the textbook fund a little more closely. Back in the day when we had balances to transfer to these other funds, the first fund we would transfer to is textbook, to give it $50,000 or something to keep the curriculum purchases and the adoptions going. Now that we don't really have cash balances left at the end of the year, we're not making those transfers. And in the next couple of years, we can't go forever, I guess, with that scenario in the curriculum field. So with those things being said, that gives us some information for executive session in terms of what we could potentially do for negotiations and such. We haven't talked a lot about potential budget changes other than a couple positions. And I don't know if you want to go into that, Mr. Dorothy, but we're in that ballpark of being able to make something work for next year in terms of, these decisions. It just depends on what you want that to look like. And I think that's kind of a nutshell of things we're looking at, the big things we're looking at for next year's budget.
Right. I do think even with the additional funds that are coming to the district, I do think over the next couple of years, because of our enrollment decreases, we are going to be facing some challenges with budget. I think we're going to have to watch that fairly closely and watch what we do. I just don't think, yes, what the legislature and the court have done is definitely helping school districts. Most certainly is. But at the same time, that money doesn't stretch as far, and it depends on the district. Each district is individual and different. Some it's helping more. Our district does not get help necessarily as much because of our size and because of the demographics of our students. We don't receive quite as much money as some others do. And we're facing enrollment decreases if this doesn't change. So we could have some challenges ahead with the overall budget for the district over time.
May I ask a clarifying question? And maybe this is the wrong place, but about the CARES Act money?
Yes.
Is this now, is some of that, is there a formula that some gets allocated to the special education interlocal, or is that just kind of at the discretion of the districts? Is that 94,000 all ours, is I guess that you had sent out in our email?
Correct, Susan. That 94,000 is for USD 348 to use how we feel, how our board feels within some certain parameters needs to be spent. That is not special ed money. I do believe, and I don't fully understand it because I haven't paid that close attention to that part of it, but I do believe there's potential for some special ed money to come in. I think there's a good possibility that that's coming. I do think the governor has a lot of say-so in that money. And so it could come to, it depends, you know, whether she wants to concentrate the money that way or she could use it other ways. But I do think there is potential to have some money for special ed through all of this money, not the CARES money that the district is getting, but additional funds. She's getting quite a bit of discretionary funds to use for this whole thing for the entire state for a lot of different budgets. So I think there's potential for special ed, but right now, Susan, I couldn't say how much or what that's going to be. I've heard some numbers thrown out there, but all of that was just guessing.
Yeah. No, that's fine. I just was wondering because I haven't read everything I need to probably about the CARES Act. So I was just, my question you answered was, is that all for USD 348? So thank you.
Does anyone else have questions at this time about budget considerations?
Oh, I do have one other question for Cindy. What was our new state money from last year? You mentioned the 286,000 for this upcoming budget year. It was in that ballpark-ish.
It was in that ballpark. I do not have that on my spreadsheet, so I'd have to look back and let you know.
Okay,
but it was definitely in the 200,000 range. I'm just not sure exactly, so I'll find out.
Okay, thank you.
Cindy, is there anything else that you need from us at this moment in time regarding the work that you all are continuing to do on the budget?
You know, probably not open session items. We will bring this back to you. Hopefully by May's board meeting, we know about those health insurance increases, the property insurance increase, and we can dive deeper into the specifics at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You know, I'm sorry, I have a quick question, and I'm sorry, it's probably really minor, but how is enrollment counted? Is it the day that school starts? Is it an average date? How is that counted?
It goes on, Carrie, it goes on September 20th. That might adjust a little bit if September 20th falls on a weekend. It might be September 21st. But on that date, whoever's enrolled in whatever programs on that date is what we get to count for our enrollment. Now, it used to be that fall's count. It now falls back to last year's count, but they do, if a district's enrollment is going down, and that's what Cindy was talking about, that we're still able to count our 18-19 enrollment, they give you a 3-year look back, and you can take the average of the 3 years or the highest years. So there's some opportunity to do that, but it's always based on the September 20th count for each one of those years. And the point Cindy was making on that was we're able to use 18-19 one more year, which was a higher enrollment. We can use that one more year, but it goes, this would be this coming year will be the last year we can use that enrollment. And then we have to start using these lower enrollments for our funding. But it's always on September 20th.
Okay. All right.
Good question.
I was wondering if the drop, closing it for the end of this year would affect it at all, or, and then the 1918 was confusing me. So thank you. Now I got it. Thanks.
And PS, there are no dumb questions ever. And sometimes even when we have heard stuff before, it's good to have things be refreshed. So please don't apologize ever about asking questions, because it helps everybody.
I'll blame the plague anyway.
Okay.
So.
It's my go-to for everything. All right, guys, moving on to, this was one of the things that was amended, discussing the iPad quote.
Yes, technology has gotten a quote for 110 iPads. That portion would be for the high school one-to-one rotation. It's 110 iPads for the high school rotation, and then 80 for technology, and 20 of them are going to the PC. Mr. Dorothy, I wasn't in on that meeting, but this is what they were planning to do just for general education needs. Is that right?
That's correct. If I remember right, if you guys remember when we approved the technology bid back in February, Steve recommended to pull part of it out because they weren't giving us a good break or sale on it. So we're bringing that back now, where we've been able to take a better advantage of the pricing on it. So part of this is our normal one-to-one, rotation. And the other part is we pulled those out because they weren't going to give us a good deal on it by purchasing them at that time. Steve, if I'm not completely right on that, please let me know.
Yeah, I think that's how it is. The 110 was out of that other fund, and then the technology was the 80 would have keyboard cases with them, and they will go to the IC, and then the 20 we may have to shift a few back and forth, but the 20 for the primary center without keyboards.
Okay, and I believe we'd be finding a different type of case for those 20 that are going to the primary center, right, Steve? Okay, and so the total of those with the keyboard cases for most of them is $76,180.
And what do we budget for on that one?
The rotation, the iPads are coming in less expensive than we had. They gradually get a little less expensive. And so I think we had budgeted for the high school, we were looking at 52, it's only 41. And then just using the remainder of the technology capital outlay budget for the rest of them.
Thank you.
Which we had used part of for computers earlier. So all of this would be coming from the capital outlay budget.
I move we approve the expenditure of $76,180 for the iPad quote that's been given as presented. That'll work. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Chris has seconded. Okay. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same signs. Motion carries 7-0. Beg your pardon. Okay. The next thing, we struck the 2021 discussion of the fees, and we added approval for bond refunding.
Yes, and those bonds, which is the 2012 bond series, has been refunded the 4,575,000, providing a savings, an interest savings of 371,000. And we just need a final board approval for that to go through.
Who doesn't want to jump all over that motion? That's awesome.
I move we approve the bond issue as Cindy stated.
Okay,
I'll second.
that works.
I believe that was Tony that seconded. Yes. All
It
right.
was, yes.
Thank you. All right. All those in favor of approving the bond refunding, raise your right hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
We like good news.
Yeah.
All those opposed, same sign. All right. Motion carries 7-0. Thank you. Thanks, Cindy.
Yes, thank you.
That takes care of everything in financial. We have nothing under administrative reports tonight. So now we'll move on to old business. And that will, what we added to or amended to the agenda was to add the district designation for our summer food service representative. Mr. Dorothy, do you want to elaborate on that a little bit, just so everybody knows?
Yes, because we're running that summer meal program just like we did last year. This is a continuation. Each year we have to designate who the representative is for that. That would be Nicole Burnett, our food service director, who's done a great job with the spring meals and last year's summer meals. And so the recommendation is to designate Nicole Burnett to be our representative for our summer meal program that will start up almost right after we finish the spring one and then run for the good rest of the summer. So we would just need a motion to designate her as the summer meals representative.
I move we designate.
I move we appoint Nicole. You go, Susan.
I move we appoint Nicole for the summer food program.
I second.
Okay, Susan moved, Carrie seconded. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye to approve Nicole as the summer food rep. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries 7-0. Thank you. All right, moving on to new business. First item there is the adoption agreement and legal assistance fund contract.
Each year, KASB, this is our legal assistance we get through the Kansas Association of School Boards. The contract is for $2,100. Each year, the KASB would like each board to approve the contract for that agreement for the $2,100. So I guess I'm recommending and asking if the board would approve that continuing. We've done this for years and years to continue to get them. And we do use them a lot. I do, Cindy does, our principals do, board members can use them for paying the $2,100. It's pretty economical legal advice.
I move we continue to pay for the KASB legal advice.
Second.
Susan has moved and Tony seconded that we extend this for another year for $2,100 a year. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye.
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 Those opposed, same signs. Motion carries 7-0. Okay, district grading policy.
Okay, so I want to say this ahead of time. We're not necessarily asking the board for any motion on this. We're going to have a discussion, and I just want to make sure the board is okay with what the principals talk about at each of their buildings for what they're wanting to do with the grades. I don't think this is going to be real complicated. The high school may be a little more complicated than the other buildings, but we're just going to have a discussion. If there's any part of this you're uncomfortable with, then let's have that discussion tonight so that the principals know that there might be some areas that we need to look at. So with that, I think our first one is we'll start at the PC with Deb. Deb, do you want to just briefly talk about how grading will go at the PC?
We will pretty much take everybody from where they were on March the 5th, and they'll maintain that level. Some of our grades are satisfactory, unsatisfactory. Everybody will be satisfactory. With classroom grades, everybody will continue where they were as of March the 5th. If we have concerns about kids in August, we can use the MAP assessment to assess current levels in reading and math. But we would be planning on every child going on to the next grade, with the exception of those kids that we've already met with parents and determined that retention might be in the child's best interests. But in August or whenever we get back, if parents have concern about progress or lack of progress, we could do MAP assessments and then determine whether the child goes on to the next grade or not at that point.
Any questions for Deb, PC wise?
Yeah.
Go
Related
ahead.
to that testing, like the MAP testing question there, is it a possibility to get students in maybe I'm just saying at the end of July, for instance, kids that were kind of on that bubble, and conducting assessment with them to kind of evaluate whether they would be ready for that progression to the next grade, if we're already kind of having that conversation about should they advance or should they be retained?
We could if we had staff on site.
Yeah, that's a good point there. But in theory, we could kind of, put some data behind the decision before August then.
Yes.
I think that's possible, Chris. Yes. I don't know if we'll be able to, but it's possible.
Yeah, if it's my understanding, like I don't think we can remotely, get them into the MAP testing system. But if it's a one-on-one situation, it's safe enough. Obviously, we could problem solve around that. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, we could do that.
Anyone else for Deb? Okay, Dan, kind of briefly go through what you guys are going to do at the IC.
Yeah, ours is not much different than Deb's. We decided what our staff wants to do is they want to do a pass incomplete option, and really the incomplete would have to be our only real obstacle with that is that's a judgment call to some degree. I mean, we can say you didn't complete all of what we assigned, but we also know it's not really fair for us to evaluate why it wasn't done based on the fact that it didn't happen under our watch. We were not there to see what happened. We don't know the circumstances. And so I think we would still have to figure out what constitutes that? What's the level of completion that you have to get to avoid an incomplete? But it's that option for that. If the teachers reached out, if I've reached out and they're just not doing anything, that's the option we would have. It would not prevent them from moving on. We would do something similar to what Deb said is, if we are concerned or a parent's concerned, we can do a screening. We're just starting the year knowing that we're going to have to do a little bit of backtracking to make sure everybody's caught up, and the start of the year is going to look different than it normally does. And we're in the same position. Like if we weren't going to retain someone before spring break, we're not going to retain them now based on what they've done, because it's just not an accurate way to assess, is this a content knowledge issue, or is this simply a matter of circumstances that if they were here with us, we wouldn't even be discussing retention. So that's what we decided to do with your approval.
Anyone questions for Dan?
Yeah, Dan, I've got a question. If a student would get an incomplete, when would that be determined? At the end of the school year?
Well, we want to be able to tell parents pretty soon, like, here are the two options for you. So they would know, like, if you don't complete X number by the May 19th, then we'll have to mark it incomplete.
Right. And would there be any opportunities for remediation of that over the summertime, or it would just wait until the beginning of the school year?
I think
go ahead.
Yeah, I think it would just be, that's the grade card is going to have an I, and it could be that's only for one subject, because we'll be able to do it subject by subject. Okay. And it's just a note for us that you didn't complete everything. You didn't complete what we asked you to complete to, maybe 75%, whatever it turns out to be. Right. Just as a way of,
and I'm not questioning it at all. It sounds like you're being very sensitive to different circumstances that families have.
Yeah, and we really don't have very many kids in that situation. I've only had to make a couple of phone calls where I've had to kind of use if your kid's not going to do anything, there is always that chance that they're not going to be ready to move on, and that's prompted some of them to, okay, we'll get on it. I don't do that unless I'm convinced and I know for sure, like, this is not a circumstance issue. This is simply I'm taking advantage of not having to go to school, and so we're all just doing nothing.
We understand that distinction at the university level. So I appreciate that contact.
Anything else for Dan at the IC? Okay, Mr. Bland, how about the junior high's plan?
Okay, well, much like Deb and Dan, we would like to move to a pass, fail, or incomplete. With an incomplete being those students who have really not checked in with our teachers at all, and then pass or fail based on their engagement from there forward. As far as retentions would be concerned, I pretty much knew who before spring break was likely going to be on that list, and this really isn't changing that a whole lot. But we're finding is the same students who engaged beforehand are for the most part the same students who are engaging now. And I've started to have those conversations with families the best I can otherwise. But grade guards will either get that pass, fail, or incomplete posted to them depending on their level of engagement there. And I like the idea of Ray's, maybe if I was board member Brown, about having a deadline for incompletes. That might be something we get to toss around a little bit more. That's what I got.
Sorry, any questions for Derek? Okay, Mr. Brittingham, kind of walk us through the high school. You'll have to unmute, Brant.
Thank you. So I might be a little more long-winded than the others, and I think the obvious reason is at our building, everything is dependent upon credits and gaining credit so that you can reach the 24 and obviously graduate. And so what I did is I've kind of I put together something today because I've talked at length with Mr. Dorothy, and quite a few other people over the course of the last 2 weeks. And what I think happened, since we started this on March 30th, unfortunately, I think some of the bigger districts have kind of, I don't know, for lack of better terms, I guess they put us behind the 8 ball in the sense that a lot of them have chosen to freeze grades. And so obviously word has gotten out, and I've even gotten some emails from students, are our grades going to be frozen? And my response really at the time was, currently your grade can go up or down. And I've just left it at that. So I think in one instance, and I'm just going to give you some examples of things that have been brought to my attention so that you have the whole picture. One would argue that for freezing grades, if you freeze grades, then obviously you give kids the opportunity to raise their grades. So when I say freeze grades, I don't mean that they can't raise. The reasoning or the rationale behind that is, let's say we have a student, and I'm just throwing this out there, a student that has a 3.6 GPA, and because of the circumstances in which they're in, maybe they drop below, their GPA drops below a 3.5, and now they have the ability to apply for a certain scholarship. And so now they're pitted against students from some of these bigger districts that had their grades frozen, and maybe because of that, their grades remained above this threshold. And so in one instance, it could hurt some of the upper level kids, and just it's not really a level playing field. Couple other things in regards to freezing. Really, in this time, I found as people communicate and I make phone calls and so forth, you can't even assume that good families have stable homes during this time. We can't make that assumption because normally, they're good at school, that things are going well. We don't know what the home life is like. People have contacted me and said because of this whole scenario, there's a father that's suffering from depression, and the kids have to pick it up, and so there's some unique scenarios out there where obviously, doing the schoolwork isn't the top priority at the time. Some of the spotty internet, maybe the parents are essential workers and their siblings at home, and now maybe the high schooler is taking care of the younger siblings. If you're a household like us, and let's say there's 4 children in the house, maybe you only have 1 device, and so now a parent has devoted, even if it's 4 kids and it's only an hour a day, well, now that parent is trying to work 1 hour at a time with each student, so now there's 4 hours gone. And then just some other random thoughts on freezing. I think if we have higher expectations, or I've been told if we have higher expectations versus lower expectations, one is going to pay much bigger dividends in the future. And ironically, the one that will pay bigger dividends is probably lower expectations. And the reason or the rationale behind that is, if we choose to be really extremely hardline in this, then and a kid doesn't graduate, or they flunk something and they don't graduate, not just this year, but in the future, that will be much more evident 10 years from now, versus if we decided to, I guess, lower expectation. I don't know if that's a correct term. But, we pass a kid maybe that shouldn't, and because 10 years from now, that probably will matter. Couple other things. I think maybe the one exception to this rule of freezing grades might be weighted or dual credit. Dual credit, I know for certain, that's through, Johnson County, Neosho, and so forth. We don't have the ability to negotiate on that. And so that is, that's non-negotiable. And the other thing I talked to Jana today, or Dr. Hare with today, is, 30 minutes, unfortunately, is different from everybody. And, 30 minutes, the target for some might be 15, and for some it's 45. And if that kid doesn't communicate with us, then it's hard to gauge, what that 30 minutes actually looks like per class per day. A couple other things then, in terms of, when KSD set this forth, I don't think their intention was for the grades to be frozen. because they pointed out there was a need to identify essential learning. You could say, well, what will the expectation be in August if, in fact, in August we are having to do something similar to this? You're certainly not going to say that grades are frozen in August. But again, you could argue, well, we have the whole entire summer to, set forth that expectation through email and social media. The other thing in terms of raising and lowering, we've had people that have stepped up. We have people that are in constant communication with kids. I've asked to be CC'd on emails, and I put them in a folder, and that never, even our paras are knocking it out of the park because they're constantly just shooting kids an email. We have a no contact list, which myself, Dr. Breckheisen, both social workers and both counselors, teachers can certainly making phone calls, but then we reach out to those families. We don't hit all of them, but I think last week we made about 50 phone calls between the 6 of us and so forth. And so that changes from week to week. So who are we really concerned about? We're obviously concerned about the student that's doing absolutely nothing. Because if currently what we're doing, their grade is going to drop. The students whose grade could drop from a 60, that's who else we're concerned about because they're no longer recovering credit or gaining credit. And then of course, the students whose grade might drop a letter grade, because then that maybe changes their overall GPA. And then finally, I got a couple other random thoughts. I told people this morning in the staff meeting, as administrator, I don't know if we're giving teachers enough credit for having a grasp on how to proceed with grading during this period. And I've talked to a lot of teachers, and I bet they have a better grasp as to what the definition of grace is in this time. I have an idea of what I would like to do, but I would like some feedback because I'm not trying to downplay the significance of other buildings, but it really is a different beast in our building when you start factoring in credits. So I don't know if anybody has any input. The last thing I'll say is this. I made a phone call today, and the mom got laid off today, and the student is really struggling. And I thought about it a little bit. We can certainly choose to freeze grades, but where I keep coming back to is, and I preface it by saying I don't think grades should be able to completely flop. But if we freeze grades, in my mind, are we doing kids a disservice? Because if we freeze them, the whole point is I guess the question is, what's your definition of grace? And we are doing our best work, I think, when grades aren't frozen, because we're going out there and we're making contacts and we're doing the things that we're supposed to do. And sometimes I think we need to put trust in those teachers. And I will certainly, whatever decision we want to make, I'll stand by that and so forth. And we'll get teachers to buy in. So I don't know. Mr. Dorothy, I don't know what else you might have to add that I didn't cover, because you and I have talked at length about this. In the end, I want to do what's right. And that's why I've given a wise man from our staff told me today, make a decision and move on. But quite frankly, as I think about it, to me, this is the biggest decision we've made, or I've made all year. And we've dealt with quite a bit. So I'll shut up now.
Grant, Mr. Dorothy, did you want to address it? I'm sorry.
Well, I got a couple things, but Susan, if you got a question, go ahead. I know where I think I am on it. So if you want me to go ahead and do that, Susan, and then you can ask away. Here's my feeling. I don't want the process to hurt a kid's grade here, because this most certainly is different. Every kid, every teacher is going through a whole different unprecedented process here to get here. So I get that. If a kid had a solid A going into this process, my feeling is if they give us some effort, I don't think the teachers should count them down to a B if they've tried under their conditions to maintain that A. If my concern is those kids that do nothing and put no effort in, then I don't think we should fail them unless they were at a D minus. I don't think we should fail them, but yeah, could you lose a letter grade over this if you don't put any effort in at all? Yeah, that's potentially there because we do want them to do this. The whole idea is to get some essential key learning pieces to them before the end of this year. We do have some classes at the high school, like AP classes and college classes, those dual credit classes. We don't have a lot. Those are heavier, and it's hard to even hold them to that 3-hour window for a whole day because of the demands of those classes. But I think those kids knew that when they took those classes up front, those were going to be a little tougher. So I don't want to see some kids' GPA blown up because we're in this whole new process. But at the same time, I'm saying, give us some effort. If you put some effort in here, we're not going to penalize you because I don't have great internet or, I really need to sit down with my teachers. I'm not good at sitting at home and getting a contact a couple times a week and getting this done. And then have the kid blow their GPA. So I tend to want to lean towards letting our professional teachers make a good call based on the effort they got from the kid during this time. At the same time, it's kind of hard for me if the kid just says, nope, I'm going fishing every day, I'm done, then I think that's a bit too far, and I think we've done a disservice to the kid. And we're also then not supporting our staff because I believe our teachers are working their butts off at this. Most certainly it's different at the elementary than it is at the high school. It always is. But I do think we've got staff at the high school that are really putting in effort to try and get this to kids and do key concepts for kids. So I think we have to support, part of this is we have to support our staff. So that's my 2 cents on it. I just want to make sure that we kind of get the philosophy of the board and whether that fits what you think, or if you think we should be doing something very specific, then let us know that tonight. So I'm done.
I just wanted to, affirm something that Brant said, and that was that I really appreciate his attention to future ramifications. And while he talked about it as lower expectations, I think about it as do no harm, because there's potential for us to do a lot of harm at the high school level when we're not attentive to the ramifications that could come out of failing kids who are having privilege layered on top of layer upon layer of privilege in this situation. So I guess I just was affirming and appreciating that he and his staff both are being attentive to the fact that there could be future ramifications for students. And it's not necessarily that they are college bound. It could be anything that is their next step. And there was an article that came out of San Francisco from Dr. Reston, who was advocating that, and I think San Francisco schools are giving all A's. And I know that sounds like, oh my gosh, let's give everyone a participation prize. But it's under the guise of, I'm not suggesting we do that, of doing no harm. And it's really no different from the federal government sending out an economic stimulus check to everyone. We don't, whether they deserve it or not, it's, that same kind of thinking. But so I appreciate what all of the principals are doing and how thoughtful they're all being about this. And I especially appreciate that it's a little bit layered concern at the high school level. So thank you, Brant, for being thoughtful and attentive to those. And I'm not trying to get in the weeds and tell people what to do, because none of us know the answer. We don't know how to assess cognitive growth through virtual learning. That's just really, really hard. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll jump in just real quick here as well, and just say I completely recognize that it's an extremely thorny and complicated issue from kindergarten all the way up through a 12th grader, and I just encourage you guys in your discussions over the next couple days here and weeks to try to get as much continuity as possible between each of the buildings. I know that's a somewhat impossible task, but I'm just cognizant of those parents who have kids at the PC, IC, junior high, and high school, and to have 4 different policies they're going to hit with and 4 different due dates for things. It's a lot to manage for them too. So just being aware, if you can get continuity on a way we're phrasing something, or a finalization date or something, really strive for that part of it as much as possible.
So I'd like to jump in and just make a few observations. First of all, Brant, again, we appreciate all the work that you guys have put into this and the thought you put into it. And I resist the phrasing of lowering expectations. I think we need to acknowledge that taking classes through an online medium is very different from being in person. And so what we're going to do is we're going to modify expectations, not lower them, just change them to be appropriate to the modality that we're delivering the lessons in. I agree with you that freezing grades is I think, for lack of a better description of that, I think that's an appropriate way to move forward, because we know that student performance, any performance, human performance, the best predictor of it is past behavior. And we've had 3/4 of a school year of student performance to have a sense for where the various students are. And I know that the teachers at the high school know their students well. And so I'm going to trust them to know what are appropriate expectations for their students moving forward. They may not know all the circumstances that the students have in their home environment, but they probably have a sense for the academic effort that they put in over the course of this school year. And so I think we need to trust their judgment on that. The other thing is, Susan, I didn't know about this San Francisco situation where they're giving everybody A's. And I don't think that giving everybody high marks is equity, right? Some students are not going to make as high grades as other students. That's the way it is in schools forever, right? And I think that that's appropriate to make those distinctions within reason, understanding that the rules changed 3/4 of the way through the school year. And so I'm going to trust you all at the high school level. I'm going to trust you all at all levels of the schools to make the appropriate decisions about where your students were when this disruption occurred and how they've progressed since that point in time, given the fact that everybody's all over the place, and home situations are scattered in all kinds of ways that we couldn't predict and we can never fully manage. So given that limitation, I'm gonna vote to trust the teachers and trust the administrators at the various schools to make the best decisions for the students that are not only fair, but also generous, right? Giving students as much generosity as we can as instructors.
Yeah, Tony, that's a great point. It's like nobody enrolled for this course that we're all in right now, and so continuing to hold to that previous standard is a really complicated task there. But just to echo what you said as well, like I completely default to the educators that know these kids and these families over my expertise in this little office up here in Baldwin. But so leave it to you guys. But I think that's a good valid point to bring up, that nobody signed up for this, this situation here. So we got to kind of rethink the way we're operating here.
I think you put it really good when you say to give they deserve a little grace, and we should give them grace because we're expecting it. Our teachers are expecting it, and they have put in whatever work they have until now. And so freezing a grade or letting them show what they have is a good option. And I know when I was in high school, as soon as I got my acceptance to college, I kind of checked out myself. At spring break, I kind of checked out, and that's reality anyway. And now they have this layer on it. So I think that we need to just accept reality for what it is and the situation they're in, and help them the best we can with the calls for the kids who aren't getting stuff done. And I mean, that's amazing that the pairs are stepping in and everyone's doing above and beyond. And I think that with that and everyone coming together, it's that in itself is a lesson for them. So I think that, whatever you guys decide is great, but I think that, I support everything that you're saying. And I think that it sounds like everyone does.
The last thing,
Andy,
where's he?
sorry, go
Oh.
ahead.
Hello. I don't have anything to add. I'm just grateful for all the thought that the leadership team has done on this stuff.
The last thing I guess I would say, and this is where I'm stuck a little bit, as I've thought about it, we talked so much about essential learning and so forth. And when I made that phone call today, and I went to get groceries in Lawrence, so I had time to drive and think. And then I think that's when it hit me. I don't know. Like I said, we put so much emphasis on essential learning. But now more than ever, I think the piece that we're really missing or we're not emphasizing is it's really about social emotional. I mean, and what I mean by that is when I called the mom and I talked to the kid on the phone today, what I asked is, how can I partner with you? How can I help? What do you need from me? We have resources. Do you need to talk? Can I put you in contact with our social worker? Right? Mom's crying on the phone. And what do you want me to do? Because I feel so strong that in the end, if I don't do everything in my power, or our staff doesn't, to help a kid do something, and I get that that's going to vary from kid to kid, but we've got to find a way to get a kid to do something, because that piece of it, the resilience, the grit, whatever term people want to use, that in my mind, that's going to pay off. And that's part of, I mean, I always say you're only as good as your mentors. And that's something that I'm here not because I'm smarter than everybody else, because I had the ability and people instilled in me the ability to grind it out. Now I get that's a hard task to do virtually, but if I could do anything in this time for our students, that's what I would really like to emphasize and instill in them. And I have some ideas tomorrow or the rest of the week. I'll probably record a video, and I have something else I want to share with them. And I'll certainly share with you guys as well. But I think that's the piece that goes unspoken. So I don't know if there's a happy compromise out there. I think in my head, I've got one. That's what I would certainly like to arrive at, and still still show that grace that everybody speaks of. So.
Phil, do you have any thoughts?
I would echo what Brant said. I mean, I think that he's pretty right on. It's difficult in my mind to give everybody all A's, right? I mean, because there are some kids that are working really hard, and there are some kids that are not working real hard and taking advantage of it. And I do think there should be some recognition and repercussion both. I agree that we shouldn't do harm, and I don't think that I think Brant's been right on with what he said. I'd echo what he said.
So I guess I could share my final thoughts and what I think would be a good compromise. I don't know. I think I would like it so that your grade can lower in the instance that you do absolutely nothing. But I don't think it can lower more than a letter grade. And I can look at everybody and tell them that our staff, myself, Dr. Breckheisen, social work, counseling, when week 6 and week 7 rolls around and we still have a kid that's done nothing, what I would ask of teachers is, okay, what is, let's say the kid's sitting at a 55%. What do they need to do to get to a 60? And if it takes, myself calling every one of those kids, and it might, it could, the reality is this could be a molehill and not a mountain. It could be a lot less students than we're thinking, but we touch base. I will touch base with every one of those students via the teacher and say, here's what I need you to do to get to a 60. And you know what? It may not be much, it could be, maybe it's a 10-minute conversation he and I have on Zoom, or she and I, or hey, reach out to your teacher. They're asking you to read this article and write a 1-page essay. Doesn't have to be much, but I think there becomes a point in time where we really buckle down and reach out to these kids that have had grades lower and spell it out. Say, I need you to do 1, 2, 3, and I'm not saying it has to be very long. I mean, it could be 20 minutes, but something that we think is beneficial and productive, and to try to instill a mentality that you can't quit. And I mean, I feel that strong about it. And I want to help these kids more than anything. And I want to show them grace. And it's way dang easier when they're in our building, because we can high five them and we can joke, and occasionally a kid needs a hug, whatever the case, we can do all of those. So I don't know how you feel about that.
I trust you, like the others have said. I'm not advocating we give all A's, but I would also be careful about if they've never done anything and they're a student that's not going to do anything, then whose concern is it if they're still not doing anything? It's the concern that it's changed, the environment has changed. I just lost my thought.
Go ahead, Susan, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I want to be, I guess, careful about whether we're giving a student a grade based on compliance or giving a student a grade based on, what they can do. And I'm not saying inflate grades at all. I just am careful about if they've never done anything, and the only reason they've done anything is because they were in a brick and mortar building and had that support. And so now they're still not doing anything, but they don't have that support. I don't know.
And that's where I think where I've got to, and Dr. Breckheisen and whoever else, where we have to, when we speak to teachers and so forth, we convey that message. And that's where, it's not going to be fair for every kid. A kid, they might have their grade lower 5% and another kid does less and it doesn't lower at all. I don't know. Again, that's where I keep thinking, let's trust those teachers. We keep talking about relationships. They're the one that build relationships with those kids. They see them on a daily basis. And quite frankly, when I say, I just want a kid to do something, you can't quit. That might be as simple as, let's have a conversation. And, I've had kids reach out and about the predicament that they're in. And you know what? In the end, I think we'll be fair with those kids and we'll give them the appropriate grade. I believe that. And that's where I keep going back to trusting those teachers. It'll look different. It's always going to be, obviously there's no way through any of this it could be equitable, but we'll do the best to make it as fair as possible. So
can I just say that educational equity is it's a myth. We're chasing something that doesn't exist, never will exist, right? We have to differentiate the educational services that we provide to each student based upon his or her needs, no more than currently, right? And maybe the weird silver lining of the situation, as terrible as it is that we're able to teach students lessons about being human with each other and giving each other this grace, a word that keeps coming up. And I like that theme, right? I think it's appropriate to say to students, failure is not an option. We're going to do what we have to get you through this experience. But not doing anything is not an option either. And so, Brent, I like your approach. I think it's spot on, right? Reach out, ask how you can be of service, ask how you can support. I think that's difficult to argue with.
And then
Yeah.
the last thing I'll say, we do have. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Just, hey, Brant,
Yeah.
that's okay. Just real quickly, as a board member, I'm not as wrapped up about the grades, although I understand all the reasons why, this conversation is important. I have immense trust, just as everyone else here has expressed, for the decisions that go into that. As a Board of Education, what I'm most focused on is how we continue to lift up the learning, not independent from the grades that are tied to that learning. What are the learning outcomes that we can continue to support? And in my mind, Tony just hit on it. And you have too. The essential learning are the very things that we've talked about here. And to just give up and say, we're not going to require anything, even that doesn't mean that we discount grace and extenuating circumstances. I think that is so important. People are stressed. They are, kids are maxed. We have no idea what's even going on. We have inklings, but we don't know for sure what's going on in every situation. And I don't think there's any teacher at this school that I mean, and maybe I'm being naive, but I think our teachers know our kids and know, hey, if you were getting an A in here, I'm not all of a sudden going to give you a D. I just trust those relationships that are there, because that is so integral to how we function prior to this happening. And yet it is continued through this happening. So what I would like to see is just a continued elevation and focus on what we can learn from this, because ultimately that is our responsibility as a Board of Education, is always to support the learning and promote that piece of it. What those lessons look like in terms of being deemed essential are, how do you continue to have grace, not just for others, but also for yourself? Also, how do you not just lay over and die? Because I know we've probably all felt that at one way or the other. I had that day earlier today. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to keep doing this. Right? We all have those days, and then we have to figure out, okay, I have to. And that those are the life skills there. So maybe you are not performing calculus at the same degree that you were, but at some point along this process, are you trying? We can meet people where they are, and I trust that. But I think our responsibility is just to continue to promote the learning with as much grace and understanding as possible, and an understanding that the learning outcomes have shifted in this environment. And I'll be quiet.
The only other thing I wanted to add is we will have kids that do flunk classes. I mean, we had kids that dug themselves a huge hole. I had a teacher email me because he and I were discussing this, and he sent me only three names out of all his classes. And he just said, I'll do everything I can. Everybody else is a 51 or higher. But I have these 3 students who I wouldn't feel comfortable passing, and the grades were in the 30s, you know. And so even I think the other question you have to ask is under a normal, you know, fourth quarter, would this student pass? And for some, that's unfortunately it's a no too. So I mean, I just wanted to we still are going to have some kids that do flunk, and we know that. So I think I will. I'll jot down some things, unless somebody else has more feedback, and then send an email to the board tomorrow, Mr. Dorothy, as well as you, and just tell you the way that the message that I want to send to parents and students, because then what I'll probably do, like I said, I have some things I want to share. I'll probably record a short video, and then I'll probably try to have a class meeting via Zoom. And I know that not every kid's going to show up, but even if it's 20, 30, 40, then we get the word out as to how we're going to proceed with grades. So if that's okay with everybody, then if everybody feels good about that tomorrow, you know, then we'll proceed that way. So.
Okay, well, Mr. Brigham, while you're here, if everyone's ready to move on, we have one more thing we need to talk about, which was another amendment to the agenda for those who are keeping track, the weighted grades class consideration that you wanted to bring forward for us tonight.
Yeah, this will only take a minute. We had a kind of an upper level student, really just one of those things we didn't have the foresight to think about. We had to create a class for this student because of just what they're interested in. It was called Particular Topics in Calculus A. And it was like an independent study with Lori Lampy. And really, it's currently not weighted, but it should be. And so I just wanted to obviously run that by everybody. I don't know if we'll have this happen again in the future. It's only happened once in the 6 years that I've been here, where we, you know, like I said, it was kind of a segue between calculus at the next level and obviously higher than anything we've offered in the past. So it should be weighted, and it's not. But we've never had this happen before, so.
Our precedent in the past has been that the board has final approval on any classes that would be weighted. That's why Brant is asking. It can't be weighted unless the board is okay with it. So Brant really needs, if you're okay with that, Brant needs a motion tonight to say, I would approve to move calculus A projects, whatever.
Particular, yeah, I had to look it up too. Particular topics in calculus A.
Okay. I had the words that just all mixed up.
Yeah. Can we rename it?
Yeah. If the board would make a motion to move that to a weighted system.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Right, Tony?
You guys didn't like my motion.
Yes.
I couldn't find the mute button.
Yeah, I got it. Tony moved and Susan seconded, right? That we approve the weighting of calculus, particular topics in calculus A. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same signs. Motion carries 7-0. Thank you. one new school calendar.
Kelly, did you
Everyone's
say,
frozen.
did you say go forward with the calendar?
She said the 2020, 21, 22 calendar.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
So I'm not asking you to approve tonight. Generally, what we do is every spring, we try to stay 2 years ahead. We already have an approved 2021 calendar that's posted on the website. And so we're working on the 21-22 calendar. So essentially, Mike Curran puts a calendar together based on the calendar of the year before. So you got to know the basis here. And then what we do is take that calendar, he sends it to every teacher. We then send the calendar to the administration, Gary Stavanis for activities, comes to me, and we go through it. One, I try to make sure we've got all our contract days in there and we're not missing any of those contract days, or not missing any of the holidays, all of those contractual things that need to be in a calendar. To me, I'm not so much into the breakdowns, how, when spring break is or not. I just want to make sure all those legal parameters are in the calendar. So all I'm asking the board or letting you know is there's a calendar to look at. Kick it around, like it, don't like it. If you have a friend or two, let them look at it and say, you like this, you don't like it, you don't like where spring break is. Then we'll come back in May and get ready to at least tentatively approve a calendar for 21-22. Just remember, even when you approve it, it's still always pending negotiations, because contract could change in negotiations. And it won't be the first year that some days had to slide here or slide there because of some change in the calendar, event, something. So we try not to do that, but I will tell you, we have a lot of families that are looking 2 years ahead, specifically at spring break and the start of school, because they want to set vacations. So that's why we want to get it out there. Not that it's important for other educational reasons. So anyway, all I'm asking you is there it is. And we'll come back next month and have a discussion about it. And if you have concerns about how it's set up, in the end, as long as it meets the contractual, the board sets the calendar. When it starts, when it ends, all those things, the board sets that. It's not a negotiated item other than the number of contract days, the student contact days, those kind of critical things, or the holidays that count in there. Those are negotiated items. Any questions about the calendar?
all right. Board member input, co-op report.
All right, I'll jump on in. Relatively brief here, but I just want to pause and start this off with just absolutely celebrating the paras and speech and language practitioners, the OTs, the special teachers. They have single-handedly gone one by one on all 800 IEPs in the last month and worked with those families to abridge those and adjust those to meeting the expectations of this continuous learning plan. It is a really complicated topic, and there's all sorts of federal legalities that are at play here too that may still have ramifications down the road as well. But it's been really impressive watching those folks make adjustments to what was something they signed up for before in terms of those IEP plans, and making adjustments to how they're getting enacted now. And I've been affected by that as with my own kids as well. So it's been pretty incredible watching them work. But on a more day-to-day operational kind of basis here, there's been the flow of spring resignations and hirings already. We're getting some really good folks to come into the district, all 3 districts coming forward here. And Paul mentioned this as well, that there's some questions about how funding is going to, like specifically with the CARES Act, how that may impact special education funding going forward. I think I read something from KASB the other day that had mentioned that there's like a discretionary fund that the governor gets, and she had talked about potentially allocating $10 million of that discretionary fund towards special education. None of that's finalized by any means, but that would be a huge impact to the co-op's budget and reduce our level of assessment going into next year as well, at least for 1 year anyway, to be that all continues to go forward. But so how that CARES Act gets allocated and how special education funding continues is a big question mark. But so far we're continuing to operate as normal as best we can anyway at this time. But again, it's been very impressive watching everybody make adjustments on the fly here and provide services to kids. So Susan, did I leave anything out from our last meeting from last week, which seems like 6 years ago, but it was only like 6 days ago?
We got a good report from the behavior specialist also, who works with regular ed and special ed, and she took a lot of good data to report back to us. So that was helpful, knowing that the behavior specialist is also helping regular ed kiddos potentially not have IEPs. So
right. Thank you. All right, that's it from the co-op.
Okay, the next item is, it's miscellaneous. I want to make sure that all the board members know that this is always an opportunity for you to bring something forward. I want to make sure everybody feels empowered to have a voice. I know I have to do a lot of the talking as facilitator, and especially now in this virtual format, I feel like I'm talking even more, and I'm annoyed at the sound of my own voice. So I really want to make sure, especially in this climate, that you all know that if something, it could be a time sensitive issue. We want to streamline things through the agenda as much as possible. But I don't ever want you all feeling cut off from bringing something forward that might have come to you. So just know that miscellaneous item there is not just for me to mention miscellaneous things. It's for any of you to bring something forward. And I wanted to highlight that tonight and open that up for anyone who might have anything they'd like to talk about that they've thought of along the way. It really can be, we obviously want to try to streamline it so it doesn't go on for hours, as much as I like hanging out with you guys. But it is there for those purposes, and I want to make sure you're aware of that.
I do have something just to mention. And I think that this is taken care of by the Boosters Club, but is that what's called, Boosters Club? Boosters. But
the Booster Club,
Booster Club. But it's been brought up quite a few times about the graduation, like graduation alternatives. And then this weekend, there's an article floating around about posters being put up, or banners being put up with the senior pictures on it. And then someone said that the boosters are taking care of that, but people keep asking me about it. So I was wondering if there's any information about that, or if anyone knows.
I can tell you we are meeting tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. That's sort of what I was alluding to earlier when I was talking about the ladies trying to repurpose some resources that through Booster, through After Prom, etc. So the Booster, we are meeting tomorrow night at 7 to we've approved to fund posters. And so more logistics that
so there's something being
tomorrow night in terms of game plan and
something
all of
being-
that stuff about
Oh,
it so far.
okay, so there's something being done, someone taking care of it.
This does not do graduation ceremonial stuff. That would not be the lane. But in terms of support, woohoo, all over it.
Yeah, because people just started, you probably saw it, there was posts and then people started private messaging me and I was like, well, I'll ask. So I was like, I'm sure someone is doing it, but I didn't know who or
Yeah.
what. So
Let me add just a little bit to that. Good question, Carrie. I just want to make sure all the board
Yes,
knows
ma'am.
on on graduation, prom, and oh, what's the other one came up today? But so most certainly, oh, driver's ed, and a few other things this summer. We are setting on those decisions on purpose with the idea that if there's a chance we can still have some sort of formal graduation, we'll try to do that, even if that means it's in mid-July.
yeah.
I think there's a strong chance it won't ever happen the way we normally do it this year. But I think we're setting on that decision for a while, and I know some people may be taking that on as well. They're not going to do anything. I will guarantee you we are doing something for graduation. We will have some sort of graduation ceremony for this year's seniors. It might not happen till July, and it might not be the normal 1,800 people in our gymnasium, but we will have a graduation ceremony. And Brant and I have talked about a number of things. We will try to get seniors involved with that because the seniors usually have some say-so in their ceremony. But when that time comes, we will make a decision. So I don't want any parent to think, well, they've just given it up and forgotten it. No, we will have some sort of graduation ceremony of some kind. If that ends up being a car parade that goes down High Street, Baldwin, and we hand plastic wrapped diplomas to kids as they drive by with mom and dad in the back seat, we're going to figure out something for graduation for these kids. I will not let any seniors leave our school district without some sort of graduation ceremony of some kind. So I want to make sure everybody gets that. And I do think the banner thing, saw it on Facebook, good idea. If somebody can get that going and rolling, I think that's not a bad thing at all. Every year, really, not just this year. But
Yeah.
but we're still looking at prom. We're still seeing, but I can tell you right now, I'm really leery about taking and putting a kid in an enclosed car for an hour with Mike Curran and Ted Zuzio. So there are some real concerns about whether we could do driver's ed with kids this summer or not. But
Yeah.
I figure the sooner I make the decision, if somebody pressed me today and say, you got to tell us today what it is, then my answer is going to be no. If we can wait a month, maybe I can say yes, and here's how it might work. So I'm trying to wait, but I know people get impatient and feel like, well, nothing's happening, and it's not happening for a good reason. And we want to wait and see if we can get these things in normally, or some sort of virtual prom. I've seen virtual proms across the country. We may come up with some sort of virtual prom. I think Mr. Brittingham was maybe going to have that at his house. I think he was going to decorate the living room, and the kids were going to help. Something like that.
I can't even handle my 4 kids right now, let alone Yeah, I did want to add, and I can't remember, I don't know that I told Mr. Dorothy this. I did talk to Mike Patrick the other day because I had some ideas, and obviously we'd probably have to talk to city council, about some alternate graduations if we do. If we do have them in Baldwin, the only problem is obviously in June and July, it could be extremely hot. I did hear on today that Starlight Theater in Wichita, it's a drive-in. They have their facilities open. Obviously, we would not drive to Wichita, but I had this prior to even hearing that, maybe reaching out. I don't know what this would look like, but the drive-in that's between Osawatomie and Paola. You can also, if you do something in town, I was told by some other league administrators, you can rent airtime relatively cheap on some radio stations in which you could have your ceremony recorded, have your speeches and those sorts of things. So I have some ideas. Obviously, the heat's the only issue, but I've told people repeatedly, the ultimate goal would be have traditional graduation. However, if we can't do that, we will do something, and I will still have prom, and it may be prom in the gym, but I'll do that, and we'll figure that out. And I have a bunch of parents that are willing to take that on as well. So I just got an email today, and until we get something definitive from the health department, obviously, or the state, but we will certainly have something. So.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to know what to say because I figured there was something, but I couldn't say, oh, someone's thinking about it without knowing. So thank you. That's all I have for miscellaneous.
I have a miscellaneous, unless Andy, you're unmuted. Did you have something?
Nope.
Okay. I just wanted to invite some inquiry because again, this is all new to us and we don't know how it's been handled in the past, or I don't even know how necessarily many other school districts are handling it. I know how some are, but thinking about our budget and contemplating ways to save money, presuming that our SRO is working for the city and not for us, because obviously he's not able to fulfill his school contract right now. As a cost-saving measure, would it be reasonable to negotiate a portion of that officer's contract, like approximately 2 months or whatever, with the city? And certainly I'm not wanting to be petty or contentious, and I want to allow grace for everything. But by the same token, the city has us pay for using him. So they're not giving him to us. We are paying his salary. So would the reverse not be equitable, I guess? So I just wanted to invite some inquiry about that, and potentially it's not enough to save or have that discussion, and potentially it's too contentious to maybe bring up. And I want to make sure that our partnerships remain positive, but it was just something I wanted to get some feedback from you about.
And our contract with the city, I believe, was a 5-year contract that we entered. And each year we were paying a little bit more of the SRO's salary, including benefits. And so they make the payroll. We reimburse once at the end of the year for our portion. So, that can be a conversation. I'm not
so
sure
is
how
it
that
still
would
70,000? Is that what we're paying them now? 70,000?
I'd have to look at
I
that.
think that's the last budget I saw, but my memory could fail me too.
Susan, can I just chime in real quick? We are using our SRO to do welfare checks, so we are having some contact with him, albeit very, very limited. That's all I wanted to share.
That's good to know they're being utilized. Or he. We only have one, right? Do we
Yes.
only have one?
We have one. Mhm. So yeah, I'd have to look at that amount and then we could have those conversations. I don't have it with me right now.
What Susan has brought forward with that. One thing I would mention is, part of our responsibility is obviously to be good stewards of our budget. And I'm totally on the page with that. On the other side of that, I would also want to make sure as part of our inquiry or holistic discussion about that is just how any conversation about that sort of fits in with how the state has directed us to continue to pay support staff in various forms, whether they are in fact working, in their normal building capacity or not. I just would want to make sure that that's a part of what we're talking about. And that's not to squash anything, certainly, or it's not to limit any sort of discussion. But I also think from a state recommendation standpoint of how we pay support staff during this time, knowing that their roles in the buildings are different. And having heard from Mr. Bland that the SRO has been utilized at least to some degree, I would want us to make sure that part of the discussion is holistic, because I know the board, we wouldn't want to be perceived to be singling out a particular situation, but it's worthy of taking a look at. I'm glad you brought it forward, Susan, in the miscellaneous time. And I would just invite some discussion. I don't know if the board wants Mr. Dorothy to look into that more, but if you have thoughts about,
we've budgeted for
I'm
it.
thinking of that in the whole scale.
If we've budgeted for it and we're all fine with that, I don't have a problem with it. The difference I see as support staff and a staff that is working for another government entity is I'm not advocating he doesn't get paid. He should absolutely get paid. I'm just wondering who is responsible for paying, and I'm not advocating that we don't pay him. I'm just trying to be responsible with our budget as far as, is it our responsibility or is it another government entity's responsibility if that person is working for that other government entity? And, again, this is new. I don't think we have it's just, I don't know. So.
Certainly,
I
an important distinction. Go ahead, guys.
For me, I think that that brings up a good question of whether he is working for, he might do welfare checks for us, but is he doing other work for the city? Like, are we paying him to pull people over or, patrol other places or, so that would be interesting to know. I don't know if we know that or not. So that would be, to me, that would be relevant if he's doing work for the city with the school district paying for it. So that would make a difference to me.
And I only brought it up because, and I'm going on an assumption, because I've seen him working in the capacity of what other police officers are working. So that is an assumption I'm making. He could have very well been doing welfare checks. So I want to be clear that I don't want to go on an assumption. I would want to definitely verify, what you just said, Carrie.
No, and I'm just going off of the last 5 minutes of conversation. so I know nothing about it, but it would make me want to look into it a little bit more.
Well, I missed out because I've got this crappy rural internet stuff, so I missed a lot of it. But it sounds like they're talking about the SRO and being paid, continuing for the rest of the semester with him not being in the school building. Is that kind of how I'm reading it?
Not fulfilling his duties of the contract. I guess
Yeah,
is how.
so I would harken back to the idea that we have all of the staff that are getting paid and that aren't coming in, and then we have staff that are getting paid the same as those that aren't coming in but are coming in and working. And Paul, you mentioned some liability associated with that. Is there then some liability, because you said your liability was that you were kind of picking out and choosing what you were doing with it. Now, did we get into that same territory with more liability because you're kind of singling him out differently just because he's got another job, or kind of because he's kind of dual paid kind of thing?
And, with this particular service, it is not on our payroll. So it's more of a contract issue. At the same time, that issue was started several years ago with the understanding that we would gradually pick up more of the cost, even though the position may be primarily ours to begin with. They were trying to help us, phase that in. So I think it's more of a contract question than a payroll question if we choose to pursue that.
Yeah, that's what makes it a little different, Phil, is that it's contracted work rather than he's not really an actual employee of the school district. But I get what you're saying. Is it kind of, can you apply that to him? But it is different. As Cindy said, it's contracted rather than a salary.
Okay, so then do we pay the city then, or is we actually just paying him straight up and then the city pays? We pay the city and then the city pays.
The city, he's on the city's payroll, and we don't have anything to do with it until year end. We cut one check for the amount that we owe the city as a reimbursement. So it fits within the same fiscal year. But yeah.
So our decision tonight doesn't affect his take-home pay at all. It would affect more the city. Am I reading that right then?
Well, we already have a signed agreement with the city that we will reimburse them on a certain percentage basis. And so it would actually have to be a modification to that agreement, which would be something new under these circumstances.
The inquiry is whether it's worth negotiating that 2 months that he's working for the city and not working for us, I guess, maybe.
I would say, I'm not saying it's not worth a discussion and call to the mayor or whatever. But I've served on school boards when the partnership between the city and the school district was not especially rosy, and it's not a good place to be. So I want to be sure we don't, in trying to renegotiate something we've already settled, foul that relationship in any way. That's not saying it's not worth a phone call. I just want to tread carefully.
I think that's a good point, Andy. I seem to recall that this was a little bit contentious when it was passed. And so we want to be careful. But I don't think it's a terrible discussion to have, right? But the entire city council is different than when this contract was negotiated. The only person that's going to have, I think, a memory of this is the city administrator, because he's the only constant. But again, it's a conversation just to sort of say, hey, our situation has changed. Is there flexibility here? And so I think it's worth exploring, but not pushing,
right?
Because it is a pretty good relationship now, and it took a little while to get to this point.
And what makes it more difficult to have a serious discussion about is the fact that we don't know. I think it may be a long time before his role resumes its normal capacity with the district, but we don't know what that looks like really.
Right.
That's the thing, is maybe it's a good conversation to have, not to say we want to change anything right now, but kind of as a, if things change in the fall or if things look different, can we come back and talk in the fall, just to kind of lay groundwork, because maybe things are different in the fall.
Yeah, I think for me, if it were up to me exclusively, it's obviously not, it would be a call or an email to Casey and say, look, we're a little bit concerned about this moving forward. If this situation lasts for another year, maybe we sit down and have a discussion about it.
Is his contract an annual contract? Like if we renew it every year, or are we on it for like a just for the 5 years?
Yeah, it was a longer contract. Yeah. And I can't recall, Paul, maybe you have a memory for this when that contract was negotiated, but it seems like maybe 2016, 17, something like that.
I can't tell you. Cindy would, and she probably doesn't have the contract with
Yeah,
her.
I'm looking to see. It was multi-years. I want to say 5 years, and it started a few years ago.
Right.
For perspective, last year we paid $32,600 for our portion, our percentage of his salary to the city.
But what I will say, just to sort of to confirm what Andy was talking about, is that as a school board, having an SRO makes absolute sense to us, right? Because we see all the benefits of that person. Those benefits are not necessarily obvious to city council members. And so that's the only caution that I would throw out there, because I've been on that other side, and it's like, well, what do we get out of this? And you have to convince the city that there's a lot of benefits to Baldwin City in general by having an SRO position.
One good thing, Scott Lordson sits on the city council now. Scott was on the school district when we first negotiated this thing at that time. That's Andy was on, Scott Lordson was on the school board at that time. And Tony, you were on the other end, I think, when we first negotiated that with the city side of it. So it's not like there aren't some people that have some memory on how that went at one time, so.
The contract started the most current contract started in 2016. And this year we would be paying 50%. When it started, we were only paying 35% of the total cost for this person. And then it increased 5% a year, and it will be 50% this year.
Thank you for that, Cindy, because I thought we were paying $70,000 and
So yeah, it is almost time to renegotiate this.
I think it might be worth just like Andy said, maybe an email just saying, not to renegotiate right now or ask for anything, but just say, we recognize that this might be an issue. We just want to bring it up, just kind of like as a little heads up. And, because if we are in a different situation next year, it's going to be a problem, or it could be a problem.
I think you're right. If it's ongoing, that there could be potential ramifications down the road if we, are in this situation for several more months beginning of the year. So I debated whether even to bring it up, but I just felt like it's something worth discussing. So.
Well, and for all of you, I don't want to be an apologist for the city, because I don't wear that hat anymore. But if we're in this situation for the next year, the city is in this situation for the next year as well. So everybody's going to be in a financial bind, and so that whole contract may go out the window if this situation persists.
True.
And I certainly don't want to instigate that. I want us to have an SRO.
So I want to make sure I'm characterizing or summarizing where I think the majority of you guys are at. And please correct this if I don't have it right. But I think what I'm hearing from everyone, just so we can give Paul some direction about how, where we are as a group, would be the following. I would characterize in the following way. We don't necessarily, after having some conversation, we don't really necessarily have an appetite to look at that for this particular year, knowing the percentage of what we are actually paying at this particular time, but that we do want to have that on the table as something that we need to keep a close eye on as stewards of the budget moving forward. as we all could need to be with all sorts of things, but that this would be one of those things that we would certainly need to look at. Is that a fair characterization of how the conversation has developed? Is thumbs up, thumbs down? I don't want to misstate. Sorry, switch screens here. Is everyone, is that
And
right, Carrie?
I think so. And I don't know that we necessarily need to say anything. I think that what you just said, we just need to kind of keep an eye on it and keep it in our minds. I think that's what I think.
Okay. I'm personally comfortable with that. I wanted to hold off. We all need each other. The relationship between the city and the school district, I feel like I've seen improve greatly from the time that I even moved here. And I know that none of us here would want to jeopardize that, but we still have a responsibility to be stewards of our respective lanes. But to prorate for 2.5 months and then sort of back calculating the amount of home visits that this person is doing. I haven't heard from the other 3 principals. I've heard that myself, like word on the street, but I didn't have that validated. Mr. Bland said that there have been some home visits. How we calculate that in terms of renegotiating something for the remaining time left. In terms of the standpoint, worth it in terms of the relational number when we are epidemic, that would be my concern. But at the same time, I think all of these sorts of things we must keep a close eye on as we plan ahead, and take a look at all of that. But I want to make sure everyone feels comfortable that they've had enough. Okay, well, here we are again, folks. Oh, no, not quite yet. Superintendent's report. We are on letter K.
Well, I kind of hit my superintendent's report. I was going to talk about graduation and prom and so on. That was part of my discussion but Carrie brought up the question earlier, so I went ahead and hit it. So I don't have anything additional for my report on that, other than I want to say I have to be extremely proud of the staff in this district and the job that they did in the short amount of time to adjust to working with kids. I've been able to observe a few of those online working with kids, and I don't know, the job our staff has done working with kids, making contacts, has just been fantastic. And I'm just very proud to be superintendent here when that kind of thing is going on, and the way the staff have just jumped in and taken this on in something that probably made them all uncomfortable to start with. And they jumped in and have made it work so well with kids. The ladies that are getting online with 20 kindergartners on a Zoom meeting and having that Zoom meeting and kind of keep it to a subject area as close as you can with getting, well, my kitten did this last night, and they've done wonders. So I appreciate the staff.
Okay. I'm getting word that I'm right here in Fire Tree, so I'm not sure, I'm glitching, and if that happens, guys, just give me some sort of hand signal. So I can either restate or just keep it moving and just say, yeah, sure. Okay. Executive session, we get another crack at this.
So do you want to try to do the couple minutes?
And
then?
I'm hearing, yeah. All right, folks, I move that we go into executive session to discuss negotiation items for the 2021 academic year pursuant to the exception for employer-employee negotiations under COMA. And the open meeting will resume, and I'm sorry, with Mr. Dorothy
And
Cindy. And the open meeting will resume at 9:23. Is there a second?
Second.
Well, that's 3 minutes.
Wait a
Kelly.
minute, that's 3 minutes, yeah.
Yeah,
that is to just try this out and make sure we don't have a mess again.
Okay.
Oh, okay,
Go
okay,
real
got it.
quick, come back and make sure it works.
Got it.
And
Are we
this is-
doing the same,
This is
what
the
we tried
break.
before?
I believe this is the breakout session. Is Jana going to put us into this? Is that what we're doing? Or do you want me to try my thing again?
Let's try your room again.
Okay. All right. I will.
so
try.
use Paul's link. All those in favor, raise your right hand, say aye real quick.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, all those opposed? All right, let's try executive session, folks.
Just want to say hi to our 7 viewers out there that hung around with us. Thanks.
Okay, Andy, I think you just joined this one. You're supposed to be joining the executive session link.
Jana, I think it's over.
Andy, I think you're supposed to
Yes.
be in the executive session.
Yeah, I thought that's a link I pressed.
You pressed back to the maiden room.
But hold
Okay,
on a
I'll-
minute. 'Cause
But
Kelly-
it's okay, because Kelly's coming back.
I might have pressed the wrong link. I'm sorry, guys.
That's okay, you were just early. And Principal Bland, you have one viewer out there that said hi back to you. He happens to be monitoring the live feed from my house.
I'm
Oh,
going
hi,
to take that as a win. YouTube famous.
Kelly, you're muted still.
We'll call this meeting back to order. The test worked.
Oh, really? Yay.
It worked, so I'll need to wait for everyone to get off of that and come back here. And now we'll go in for a longer period once everyone comes back to open session. So
Kelly?
officially, we will resume. Mhm.
Can I point out that we're well past my usual break allotment time?
Just try
Yes, let's
turn
take
the
a,
video off.
let's take a break. Yeah. Yes, let's, I'll recess. I'll just recess when everyone comes back over. I might want to text Mr. Dorothy to remind him that executive session is over. I'll do that now.
You're doing it, or do you want me to?
I'll do it. Don't worry about it.
Here they come.
Kelly, is there any reason you
here they
need
come.
to hang around?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Bye, Mr. Bland. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. We'll see you guys later. Take care.
Thank you. All right, everyone back. Okay, it worked. We need to recess for to powder our noses. So now that we know it works, let's recess so that everyone can powder their noses if they need to. Let's come back at 9:30. 5-minute break for those that need to powder our noses.
If you
And
just
then
want to
we'll go
shut your
into
video
executive
off-
session for the length of time that we need.
If you just want to shut your videos off and mute.
I'm just gonna leave it. I don't need to go anywhere.
Okay.
Yeah. Recess.
All right.
I missed it. What's happening?
Recess. Recess.
Like playground time?
Yeah, like I'm gonna beat you to the dodgeball.
I'll beat you with the dodgeball.
No, I don't like
We
that.
had some requests. We had some requests for folks to be able to powder their noses in the
I got that.
facilities. So we're
Okay.
we're
but that was-
recessing until 9:30 and then.
Okay. And then to
Thank
the
you.
executive meeting room?
And then I'll have to make a new motion for executive session.
Okay, so back here at 9:30.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yes. Thank you.
a bonus of live streaming or this. I just got to say goodnight to my kids.
I did too. Worked out very well.
Got little hugs and then off to bed.
So why are you still awake? It's 9:30.
That's what I said, but Dad's in charge.
Okay.
I have
We
9:30.
have everyone. Okay. All right, we're gonna call this meeting back to order. Thanks for hanging in, guys. A lot of grace and patience, so thank you. I think we've got it figured out. All right, so we're gonna go for it. I move we go into executive session with Mr. Dorothy and Cindy Frick to discuss negotiation items for the 2021 school year pursuant to the exception for employer-employee negotiations under COMA. And the open meeting will resume at 9:50.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That vote, I think is 6 and not 7, Megan.
Okay, got it.
Did you get that? Because I
Yes.
don't think we're all back, but we
I
have
don't think
6.
so either.
Okay, okay, everyone. So now we're gonna go into Mr. Dorothy's executive Zoom link. See you on the other side. Okay. I move we go back into executive session to discuss, go back into executive session with Mr. Walsmith and Dr. Elingwen, Mr. Dorothy. Did Cindy come back in for this one, Mr. Dorothy? Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
Muted.
You're muted. There we go.
There.
All right, sorry.
That's okay.
You guys want some more time with Cindy Frick before we go in with Dan and Deb?
I think you guys know what kind of the gist of that was. So just if you had anything additional, probably.
You guys want more time with Cindy?
No.
Okay.
If not, we can go in with Dan and Deb for say 10 minutes.
Okay.
I'm just
Okay, I move
wondering,
we go into executive.
Just a second, Kelly.
I'm just wondering if, like in the regular meetings, couldn't Megan pop in and say it's time and then we extend the time so we don't have to leave executive session to come back to, we can't do it that way?
In open, you have to make the motion to go back into it in open session.
All right.
Homa.
Right, but not everybody's in there when you pop your head in. So that's why I was thinking, okay, but all right, gotcha. Thank you.
Good thought.
I move we go into executive session with Mr. Dorothy, Mr. Wellsmith, and Dr. Elingwen to discuss negotiation items for the 2021 school year pursuant to the exception for employer-employee negotiations under comma. And the open meeting will, resume at, math. Let's say 10:05.
I'll second.
Second,
Chris, second.
all those in favor, please say aye and raise your
Aye.
hand.
Aye.
All those opposed, 7-0, motion carries. Back in exec. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
They're all gonna leave.
Everybody else did. I'm gonna take my video off.
Okay, yeah, I'll do the same. I'll just open the speaker so I can when they come back.
Okay, we'll call this meeting back to order in open session. The only, do we have any other executive session matters, Mr. Dorothy, at this time?
Well, we might want to go back in for just a few minutes. I guess I need to know where the board feels like they're at. So I think we need to go back in for, I don't want to do the 5-minute thing, but maybe 10 minutes with myself and the board. Unless you would like Cindy in on that one too.
Okay.
And go back in for about 10 minutes because we kind of got to know what that philosophy is and where you want us to go.
Oh, Andy, did you say something?
So same
My turn
topic.
to be
Let's go
muted.
ahead and invite Cindy, just in case someone has a question, then she's there. Thank you, Dan and Deb. Did you guys feel like, Dan and Deb, do you feel like you need any more time, or do you feel like you were able to convey the summary of what you wanted to?
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Thank you,
I
guys.
move we go into executive session with Mr. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. Executive session with Mr. Dorothy and Cindy Frick to discuss negotiation items for the 2021 school year pursuant to the exception for employer-employee negotiations under COMA. And the open meeting will resume. Is there a second?
I didn't hear what
Second.
time you said.
Yeah, I didn't get the time.
Yeah.
10:17, that's 10 minutes. 10:17.
Can we make it 10:18 since another minute has passed? We'll have stuff to say.
Let's make it
Let's
Okay.
make it 10:20.
At
Let's
10:20.
give ourselves some time.
10:20.
I need
I'll
a
second that
Second.
since I amended it.
Thank you. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Megan's
I got 6.
6. Okay.
Aye.
I mean, that's, so, yep, go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, calling this meeting back to order. We good with executive, Paul?
I think so, unless anybody had any issues with the personnel report. I don't think that there was anything significant there. Well, I shouldn't say that all of them are significant. If somebody had an issue there, please let me know, because we should go back into executive session and discuss it. If not, I guess I would recommend that we approve the personnel report as presented.
I'll go ahead and do that then. I move that we approve.
Does anyone
the
have any
report.
questions?
Oh.
Nope.
Nope. I'll go again. I move that
Is
we
there a
approve the
second?
personnel report as presented.
Second.
Okay. Chris moved, Phil seconded, or that's who I saw and heard first. All those in favor say aye and raise your right hand.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Thank you, everyone. I know this is not easy. I appreciate each and every one of you. We did it. It will get easier. We are ready for a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, Phil moved and Chris seconded. All those in favor of adjourning, raise your right hand and say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries 7-0. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very
Appreciate it.
Guys.
Night all.